Nelson Mandela was seen as an inspiration to millions of people all across the globe, and civil rights leader Andrew Young knew him well. He's the former mayor of Atlanta, former ambassador to the UN, and the ambassador joins us this morning. Thank you for coming into our studio. I know as you wipe the sleep out of your eyes, because surely you've been probably talking to a lot of media folks. I appreciate it. You know, it was kind of shocking to hear and to learn or to relearn that he didn't always espouse nonviolent resistance. And how are you aware of when and how his outlook changed?
Well, actually, nobody espoused nonviolent resistance in the 40s and 50s. We were just coming out of the Second World War. And even in this country, we were taught that nonviolence, pacifism, wouldn't work, and it was only the experience that we began to have in Montgomery. They began to have similar experiences, and there were always, for instance, Albert Lutuli, who was the founder of the African National Congress, was very close to Mahatma Gandhi, and in those days they were strong advocates of nonviolence, and that's sort of where we caught it from. But by the time the 70s came around, it was a time of revolutionary upheaval, and to be a revolutionary meant to be violent. Not to attack with violence, but just to be considered a revolutionary meant that you were being attacked.
Mm. So how was it then? Was it in prison that his ideas had changed, and what in prison was he able to teach other people around him?
Well, I think that there is a nonviolent strain in early African cultures. People couldn't live together in tribal societies unless they had a sense of forgiveness, of understanding, and being willing to love and get along with their enemies. So that was what he was born with. He also went to Methodist missionary schools, where he learned of some of the things that were happening in other parts of the world, particularly in this country. And South Africa always had a strong legal system. The Afrikaners, who were the ones who were the authors of apartheid, had supported Hitler in the Second World War. So that meant that the Jewish community felt much closer to Mandela and the black community than to the Afrikaners. And so it was a very complex situation in which I think the law and the fact that the courts stood up for what was right with them, and even instead of just hanging them outright, sentenced them to life in prison. Now, during that time in prison, they began to realize that you got to overcome your bitterness, that you can't waste time in prison. And I think he matured spiritually and realized that he had to get along with this jailer. And he couldn't get along with him by fighting with him. He had to overcome his fear. And they realized that the jailers were afraid of them, so that when he got out of jail years later, he insisted that his jailers be seated with his family at his inauguration. And what he tried to do was to make of that jail experience something that was positive and spiritual. And young people who were in jail with him refer to Robben Island as Nelson Mandela University, because there were a number of college professors and PhDs there with him, and they had regular lectures and discussions in jail, in addition to the heavy labor that they had to do.
You know, I know that you personally knew Mandela, and so my condolences to you. And how are you doing this morning learning about his loss?
Well, I don't think it's his loss. I think we freed his spirit from an ailing body. And I think we're going to find that we're much more conscious of him now. That Christmas Day there will be a film released on his life, and I think it's going to broaden the breadth of his influence all over the world. I think for the next 10 days they're in mourning in South Africa. So it's very seldom that the news focus on anything for 10 days. But we'll be talking about Mandela and aspects of the things that he did. Like, I remember when he decided that Gaddafi was getting out of hand, and he went to see Gaddafi personally and talked to Gaddafi about turning over the terrorists that had bombed the plane in Lockerbie, and asking Gaddafi if he would quit supplying arms to people in Africa, but instead supply medicines and books and work in schools and health. And he used his personal moral authority in many situations. And I think that that moral authority is going to continue to be with us forever.
Former Ambassador, thank you so much, and thank you for being with us today and sharing about someone that you personally knew and someone that we all knew about but didn't quite know all the stories that you shared with us. So thank you, Andrew Young.
Thank you very much.